Hello everyone, welcome to this video on the Internal Complaints Committee under the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at what is sexual harassment and the Internal Complaints Committee under PoSH and how it deals with different scenarios of sexual harassment. To begin with, let us consider what is sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is any form of unwelcome, sexually determined behavior, which can include physical touching, unwanted leaning over, making kissing noises, whistling, telling lewd jokes, and so on. What we can understand from these examples is that sexual harassment does not only limit itself to the physical touch, but can also include different forms and gestures, and in this day and age, can also include any form of electronic transmission of sexual content, such as showing pornography, sending lewd messages, and so on. Now, when looking at a legal definition of what is sexual harassment, it is seen under Section 2N of the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013 that any act or behavior, whether directly or by implication, including physical touching, asking for sexual favors, showing pornography, and so on, is considered sexual harassment. What we can take away from this definition is that sexual harassment is not approached with a narrow lens, but is considered broadly. Hence, what exactly is sexual harassment can be determined on a case-to-case basis, taking into account various circumstances. An example of this can be seen in the case of Sanjeev Mishra versus Disciplinary Authority and General Manager, Zonal Head, Bank of Baroda, and others. In this case, working from home and the online workforce was considered. It was seen that any person in one state who was sexually harassing somebody else in another state would come under the same workplace, as everybody was part of the same online workspace. This is just one example of how sexual harassment can be interpreted in different scenarios. Now, let us consider if sexual harassment has occurred, what should be the first step? Of course, it is to complain. Yet, the question arises, who shall complain? Of course, it begins with any person who faces such harassment or any person who represents the victim of sexual harassment. This could be a relative, a co-worker, somebody who has witnessed the incident, or a qualified person, such as a special educator, psychiatrist, and so on. What we understand from this is sexual harassment is a very sensitive topic, and oftentimes victims are afraid to stand up. And in such situations, it is the duty of everybody around to make the workplace a safer place for women and to encourage a healthy environment. And so, in such situations, others too can make complaints in relation to sexual harassment at the workplace. Now, to who shall such complaints be made? Every workplace having more than 10 employees shall constitute an internal complaints committee. And this committee shall be made of a presiding officer who is also a woman working at the senior level of the workplace, 2 employees, and 1 external member. It is important to note that this committee shall comprise of 50% of women, and everyone nominated should be somebody who is aware of women's legal rights and issues, and preferably anybody who has taken part and worked towards the cause of women. This is done in order to ensure better understanding of issues of sexual harassment. At the same time, creating a committee where people are aware of the different issues women face at the workforce and providing them with the proper skills to tackle different scenarios. Now, let us consider what some of the duties and responsibilities of the Internal Complaints Committee actually is. Of course, one of their main duties is to receive sexual harassment complaints, to conduct inquiries in relation to such complaints, and to finally make recommendations. When receiving any complaint of sexual harassment, The Internal Complaints Committee shall ensure a fair procedure, giving the respondent and the complainant a chance to be heard, receiving different evidences, and making decisions accordingly. They shall ensure that the respondent is aware of their accusations, while at the same time protecting the individual from any form of retaliation. The Internal Complaints Committee shall look into the matter, considering the evidences. However, in no circumstance can either the complainant or the respondent take help from a legal practitioner when appearing before the Internal Complaints Committee. The Internal Complaints Committee shall also ensure confidentiality in these matters and make recommendations based on the results of what they have found. Now, what happens in the event that the Internal Complaints Committee and this procedure for redressal of sexual harassment is taken advantage of? When we consider false complaints, it is important for us to understand that just because a case cannot be proven does not immediately mean there was malicious intent and the complaint itself was false. Let us take a look at Section 14 of the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act of 2013 that talks about false complaints and provides fines for filing any malicious complaints and taking advantage of this redressal mechanism under PoSH. The Internal Complaints Committee shall take a look at all the evidences of every case and determine whether a complaint was particularly false or not. An example of this can be seen in the case of Anita Suresh versus Union of India and others, where it was found that a false complaint was made with a malicious intent due to certain issues in the workplace. In this scenario, Anita Suresh was made to pay hefty fines as a result of filing this false and malicious complaint against the alleged respondent of the case under PoSH. Now, let us consider a scenario of conciliation. It is seen under PoSH that conciliation can only be initiated by the complainant, neither party can be forced to settle, and no monetary settlement can happen under PoSH. The Internal Complaints Committee plays an important role in conciliation as well. The Internal Complaints Committee will oversee the proceedings and will ensure that the parties have a fair chance to reach a settlement, at the same time ensuring that neither party is forced to settle. It's important to note that the Internal Complaints Committee will not direct the parties to make a decision or to go towards conciliation, but will act solely as a neutral third party. However, upon reaching a settlement, the Internal Complaints Committee shall make note of the final settlement agreement between the parties. These are just some of the scenarios and how the Internal Complaints Committee acts in different scenarios and their duties as stated under PoSH. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining us for this video. We hope you found it informative. If you have any questions, do leave it down in the comments or reach out to us. Thank you once again and have a lovely day ahead.